Hey Jack,
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you. So lovely to see you this morning and to have
And you?
you. We were just talking about how we met. Oh my goodness, we did the Opera Holland Park Young Artist ballo in Maschera, didn't we? Like
We did back in the days when people could go on stage and sing to other people who would sit together and watch and listen.
exactly. And you
Yeah.
were Anckarstro in,
Hmm.
and I was your wife, Amelia.
Yeah, we used to be married. Yeah,
We
not long
used to
ago.
be, we used to be married. It's like not happening today.
No, a short thing, wasn't it? Short-lived, quite tumultuous relationship.
But we remained friends.
Oh yeah, we did. It was an amicable breakup.
But Opera Holland Park, we had Blackout Tuesday last week, and Opera Holland Park were going to do the main cast, which of the showing of the ballo. And because it was Blackout Tuesday last week, Opera Holland Park decided not to show it on the Tuesday and showed it on the Wednesday to instead. And I really want to just send loads of celebration to them for that. What a wonderful action of standing by everybody and just letting and standing by that the cause and just saying, actually, no, we want to give respect to it. So
Yeah,
thank you so
brilliant.
much, Opera Holland Park. We celebrate you. But anyway, it's 9:01. Good morning, everybody. I am Nadine Benjamin. I am the intuitive Verdi soprano. And I am a certified high performance coach. I'm a certified NLP mind coach. I'm a healer. And as you just heard with just my little ditty, that I'm a professional opera singer who loves singing all over the world. I am in a very jolly mood this morning. But I love, one of my favorite things is that I love connecting, celebrating, and championing people. And this morning we have the wonderful baritone Jack Holton. Jack Holton grew up in North Kent and trained at the Guildhall School of Music under the tutelage of John Ovens. Love him. Some of his roles have included Eugene Onegin, the People's Opera, Count Anckarstro in Un ballo in Maschera with Opera Holland Park, and Sky Masterson's Guys and Dolls with West Green House Opera. Jack is a grateful recipient of an Opera Awards Foundation bursary this year. Thank you, Jack. Morning, Susan. Lovely to see you. So, oh my God, my head's just gone black. Yes, as I would normally say, today, please, 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 Jack and I neither are medical doctors or psychiatrists, but if you need that kind of support, please pick up the phone. If you know somebody else who needs that support and you know that you can serve them or be of help to them, please, please, please give them a call and let them know that you're there. The other thing I would like to quickly talk about this morning before we start. Good morning, Grace Loveless. Good morning. Grace is just saying memories of Onegin. Bobby Jeffrey is saying, good morning, Jack and Nadine. Hope you're both very well. Happy memories. Yes, Bobby. And good morning, Lena Christmas. Morning is good morning. Lovely to see you both. So one of the things I just want to quickly talk about this morning is self-care, people. What I'm noticing is a lot of people are quite distressed, okay? So what I would love, and some people are distressed and don't recognize they're distressed, or they're anxious or full of anxiety. Please, self-care. What is self-care? Because some people say, self-care, what is that? So self-care is just like things simple as hydrating, drinking enough water, going to bed on time and having 8 hours sleep so your body can rebuild itself. Moving, doing some form of exercise. Exercise is really good for your mental health. Your mental health needs looking after at this point. Connect with friends or connect with people. If you don't have people that you can connect with, find organizations who have other groups of people who you can reach out to and can put you into contact with those people. Please, 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 it's really important. Self-care can also mean meditation. It can mean yoga. It can mean going for a walk and sitting out in the grass. It can mean having a hot bath with candles around it. Whatever that means to you. What is the thing that puts you back at ease and in calm in your body? Please, 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 please. I couldn't say it more. It's time for self-care. Morning, Stephanie. Lovely to see you. So, Jack, it's all about you now.
Oh, wow. What pressure.
Not at all. So, when did you decide that you wanted to be a singer, my lovely?
Oh, well, I grew up and I was always musical because it was the thing that first that I took to. So I was adopted, and one of the wishes that my birth mother imparted upon my going into foster care and latterly my adoption was that anything that I sort of wanted to pursue, I was allowed to try to pursue to see if I was any good at it, be it sports or dance or music or whatever. And for reasons that we'll probably end up getting into because they're to do with this, absolutely. I didn't take to too many of the other things too quickly, certainly not like a duck to water, but music was the one thing that kind of made sense to me from the outset. So when I was growing up, fortuitously, I was able to start learning the trombone at quite a young age, at sort of 8 years old, and I played that all the way through school, and it was always what I wanted to do. I found acting when I was at secondary school, really. I always loved performing. I always loved drama, and I always loved stories, and I wanted to be part of that as well. And when I was 18, it came to choosing what I was going to do, because immediately you have to know what you're going to do when you're 18. It's very important. Everybody, they have a light bulb moment when they're 18. Everybody knows exactly what they want to do, which isn't true. So I couldn't decide whether I wanted to leave acting behind or whether I wanted to leave music behind. And long story short, I ended up with choices, and I was unable to make that choice. And I thought in short, because of my background, opera wasn't something that we had at school. It wasn't something that I'd come across particularly. It wasn't something that I knew. It wasn't like a long list of operas that I'd always wanted to see. I didn't really know what an opera was. So I thought I'd invented opera. I was like, I'm thinking musical theatre, but sort of classical levels of acting, amazing music, and everything kind of consolidated, like a total theatrical experience thing. And someone wiser than I pointed out that already existed. An opera at the Royal Opera House. It was Peter Grimes, if memory serves, and
that's my favourite opera. I love that opera.
Wicked, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely.
It's so
because it's about people. It's about people. Yeah, story. So I saw it and I thought, yeah, that's exactly what I meant. Actually, it's funny that existed because I never knew. And I was already having some singing lessons because I'd always kind of want to be good at singing. And thus the slow and arduous process started, but I'm really glad it did because, it's still as much what I want to do now as it was then. More so, in fact, I've kind of fallen more and more in love with it.
Oh, it's wonderful. Well, it's great to see you on stage. And in saying that, how was your experience of doing ballo, and how did you prepare for your role? Because, that was like a main role for you, quite a big main role.
Yeah, it was an incredible experience. And it was one that I had a lot of trepidation about taking on because Verdi's repertoire you don't tend to tackle in your 20s necessarily, particularly as a baritone. It's heavier music and it's heavier repertoire. And I knew it wasn't going to be something that this was the start of many Verdi roles I was about to do in a minute. It would be a while until I kind of really delved into Verdi and repertoire. But it was an opportunity nonetheless that came up that I didn't expect. And I wanted to do it, and I thought long and hard, and I ummed and ahed about it, and I took it on. And I've never learned so much in such a space of time. It wasn't that I was taught those things. It was that sometimes you can't learn things until you have to learn things. And I've never had to learn so much in one short stint, all kind of taken on. In terms of preparing for it, because of that, I still very vividly and fondly remember the process of learning to it. I immersed myself. I listened to pretty much every recording I could find of ballo and Maschera on different streaming sites. I got old vinyl, I got CDs, and I played them and played them and played them to death until I knew the sound of the opera like the back of my hand. And I read the libretto over and over and over and over again because I was very scared. So I was scared into doing the work. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to sing this. So I'm going to have to work and work and work until I at least know it. And then at least it's not my fault if the wheels come off. But when I got into the learning of it, for me, as a dyspraxic person as well, it was so much to do with marking the score up meticulously. It looked like a sort of collage by the end. It had stickers all everywhere. There were different highlighters. It was a sort of Technicolor explosion. I think most people, if you looked at that, they'd have become distressed, but I could read it.
Yeah.
And I went over the text, and I went over the text, and I thought about the character a lot and a lot more. And I listened to it throughout all that I was doing. And as I continued to listen to it, my understanding of the story and the different characters in it developed with it. I had different thoughts with different sounds. And I just kind of found my way with it, because learning roles wasn't something I was used to doing yet. I haven't done enough roles of that size and that scale in that kind of music to really understand the process of how I go about that. So it's very explorative. But as rehearsals started, and I was still able to develop that process and change it slightly and tweak it slightly, as I saw the way you did things, and I saw the way Adriano does things, and lots of other people that are more experienced than me. And it was a wonderful thing to be in a room with all those people, because you are allowed to just copy bits of what they do, bits that they do to you. No one's there saying, no, you mustn't do that as plagiarism. You can't do what Nadine does. That's perfect. You've got to. You should always do your own thing, but you can absolutely draw on what other people do. So as the rehearsal process went on, I listened and I watched, and I loved taking on advice from anyone who'd give it to me, and that became part of my process as well. And by the end, I was, I think, a different person to who I was at the beginning of that process, because of how much I'd had to learn. And I knew it like that, and I'm glad that it was as well. I loved it.
I loved watching you. Teresa Elwas is just saying, me too, and I'm sitting right on the beach at Alderborough right now. That's the self-care. Great one, Teresa. Brilliant. Anne Haslam is saying, morning, both of you. Morning, Anne. Bobby Jeffrey is saying, you were both brilliant. Oh, so are you, Jeffrey. Thank you so Bobby, much. Man. And Gabby is saying, lovely to see you. So what would you just said something there that I really identified, was watching others, what I call role modeling other people. And I do exactly the same thing. I see someone with a skill and I think, oh my God, I want what they have, you know, in terms of how they do and how they think. And so, and you talked about this process of learning and kind of, you know, I'm the same. I always want to know, well, how could I have done that bit better? You know, was there a way that I could have got to that, access that easier? You know, why is this a challenge? You know, that whole, what new opportunities, what new way could I see this? You know, I'm forever the seeker, the questioner, you know, and it's not that I'm looking for the thing to be right, almost. It's almost, I just want it to be the best of what I can offer. You know, I really understand what you were saying there. And now, you know, one of the things that I loved about being in ballet with you is that we both I had an ally for the first time ever, is that we are both dyspraxic. We are both dyspraxic. And it was, for me, it was wonderful to be able to specifically watch how another dyspraxic was working in the room with me at the same time, and recognizing for the first time that I wasn't an obsessive. And then there was nothing wrong with, you know, specifically about the way I did stuff, because, you know, it's really, really, really important. But I want you to start talking about it now, because, you know, I love how you express it. So please tell us about dyspraxia.
I think dyspraxia is one of those things, it's incredibly common, and we hear the word more and more. We hear it a lot more than we used to. It used to be you had dyslexia, or you're just a bit dim, or you're just a bit clumsy, or you know, you're not very good on paper, or a bit slow to start. All of these terms that were preceded by the word just, as though all it is just, it's just not very good at this. And I do understand the want for things to be simple, and people don't like lots of sciencey terms overcomplicating their lives, and they don't, particularly around children as well. They don't like children being labelled as things. I do understand that. I understand the motivation of why. But dyspraxia has come into vogue more and more in diagnosis in children, in schools, in diagnosis in adults as well. We're seeing it more and more recognised. It tends to be, though, associated as like, and I've heard all sorts of descriptions of it by people that are asking about it that don't know already. It's not their fault, they don't know. As sort of dyslexia for movement, and I don't really agree with that. No. People people have associations with it. Oh, like, you're really clumsy. That's dyspraxia for you. I don't think it is. And in America for a long time, certainly in American psychology and educational psychology, dyspraxia and what's called DCD, developmental coordination disorder, were grouped as one thing. They were consolidated. So the two terms meant exactly the same thing. And the problem with that is that dyspraxia is linked to DCD, absolutely. And lots of people experience symptoms of ideomotor or executive dyspraxia, which is one type of dyspraxia or one manifestation of dyspraxia by which there are problems in planning motor skills. This doesn't necessarily mean that you're really clumsy. Is that to say that no one with dyspraxia is really clumsy? No, of course not. Lots of people are quite clumsy with dyspraxia. It does contribute, but not everybody is. And certainly I was always big as a child, so I've always been very conscious of the space around me. If anything, I've been a bit kind of weirdly small, made small, so that I don't knock things over or spill things. Have you experienced that?
Yes, absolutely. Oh my goodness.
And so you really over control things and slightly over cautious, and that then, as an opera singer, something that's got to be full body and committed all the time, it's very difficult to do that if you've got this kind of, particularly as we live in England as well, and English culture is one of those where you don't want to be a massive inconvenience to the world around you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like ironing yourself out when you go on stage. You have to like reopen.
Yeah, exactly. And we all aspire to have that in life, and it's difficult, but maybe we sometimes succeed the more we work on it. But I think for me, the truth of dyspraxia, most people with dyspraxia, nearly everybody with dyspraxia, experiences two types of dyspraxia. So ideational dyspraxia, which is linked to ideational apraxia, and ideomotor dyspraxia. So ideomotor I just talked about. This is issues with signals from the brain being translated into the body. So deciding that I want to extend my right arm, or deciding that I want to pick up a cup, or deciding that I want to jump over there or swim or anything like that. Understanding rationally what something is, what a task is, what I want to achieve, doesn't necessarily translate into my body immediately. And people have that to varying degrees. The other part of dyspraxia that people tend to experience, the other manifestation of it, is ideational dyspraxia, or planning dyspraxia as it's sometimes called. And this is more a verbal thing. I remember when I was diagnosed with dyspraxia, it was Guildhall, actually, that I forget who first spotted it. I mean, John Evans spotted it quite early on, or considered that there might be something, but other people did as well. And I was sent for a referral with a psychologist called David Grant, brilliant man. He's written a brilliant book, actually, called That's the Way I Think, which covers a lot of great information about case studies of people that have dyspraxia. But I remember I went, and it took about 5.5, 6 hours. It took ages. I was tested for dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD, all of the kind of the main and most likely learning difficulties or learning differences that people tend to have. And he explained really that a lot of the consequence of dyspraxia is because of a spiky profile, as he put it. So, for example, you might have your verbal reasoning might be amazing. It might be up here, and it's represented on a chart sort of thing. Up here, and then your processing speed might actually be very low. Your reading speed might be low, but your thinking speed might be very high. All these different facets that we don't know that we rely upon to execute daily tasks, if they're all at odds with one another, it slows others down. So if you think very fast, but you read very slowly because you experience visual stress, lots of dyspraxia, I don't know if you do, I can't really read black on white very well.
No, I don't read black and white. I tried to get people to put my scores on coloured paper, but but there's that thing of sometimes, if I tell them that I have to have it on coloured paper, then it's that thing, isn't it? But it's I get exactly the same thing. So as often as I can, like if I'm typing, I'll highlight, because you get that nice light blue box or something like that. Yeah.
And people say, "Oh, that's dyslexia." It was not, actually. It's lots of things. Lots of things can give you visual stress. Dyslexics have visual stress a lot of the time, as do we. Lots of other people that don't have either experience visual stress. So there's that. There are things like writing speed. If you find writing difficult, you'll like to get distracted more quickly. All kinds of manifestations that are due to having a spiky profile. And sometimes this can manifest itself in knowing exactly the concept that I might want to convey, but the words of that concept, for me, because I'm a very auditory person, those words are organized phonically in terms of the sound of the word. So often, if I'm typing, I'll notice this more than if I'm speaking. If I'm typing, I'll often type a word with the same phonic sound in it as the one I'm in. It's a completely different word. It starts with a different letter. It has a different definition, but it's obviously in the same part of my brain. So I then have to go back and retype because I'll have had a sort of an intervening thought in that process, which is perhaps an ADHD thing as well. But as you probably know, lots of people with dyspraxia also have ADD or ADHD. And I do, and it feeds into it. And you end up with manifestations of both that come out in weird and sometimes actually not wonderful ways. But you have to learn to overcome, you know?
It's really funny that you say that. I'm just going to just bring in Joseph, because Joseph is kind of identifying with us. So I just want to bring him in. So Joseph is just saying, really lovely to hear from a young up and coming artist. Thank you, Nadine. You are both role models. Thank you, Joseph. He's also saying, I only got diagnosed with mild dyspraxia when I went to the conservatoire too, after Mary King, love her too, suggested I should ask for someone to look into it, which is amazing. And we do need other people to point it out. I mean, mine was pointed out by a psychotherapist, actually, because I was going to her and I was like, you know, like I can do all the really hard things, but all the easy things I just find really hard. And she was like, I think you might be dyspraxic after a time, you know. So it's really interesting. But please carry on.
So as I've lived with it, and obviously because I trained at Guildhall, conservatoire training, particularly there, actually, I think is so much a process of learning physical skills and developing physically as a performer, as a singer, as an actor, across all strands, really. And singing is one of those things where it's the finest of fine motor skills, because it's tiny little bits of cartilage and muscle and things like that, responding essentially to thought, which is exactly the thing that dyspraxics find most difficult. And as I've learned more about how I learn things, I've learned things about dyspraxia. One of the first things that I wanted to mention, which I learned in order to deal with it, was I started to realize more what the common problem was with me learning a task. It wasn't that I found it difficult. It wasn't that I was necessarily slow. It also wasn't that I didn't understand how to do the task. It was that there was obviously some kind of break in the chain of events between being told how to do something and actually doing it. Sometimes be verbal, and often in singing literature, there's loads of really esoteric and sometimes abstract terms that don't, I mean, do they mean anything at all to anyone? And if they do, there's certainly very specific definitions for very general sounding terms, like narrow through the passaggio. I mean, that's not a physiological phenomenon. Like, it's not, okay, folds get longer, right? They get narrower, but that's not a thing anyone, dyspraxic or not, no one's going, absolutely, I'll get you completely. They all pretend to. People love to pretend, it was just intuitive for me. No, it wasn't. I heard you last week and you couldn't do it then. You can do it now. You want to do something in the meantime. People like to cover things up like that because it makes them seem more impressive. This made me very intimidated as a dyspraxic person, because it was like, well, I wouldn't have had the foggiest idea how to do that. And that's okay. This is what I began to refer to as blank canvas syndrome, because you start off and at the beginning, you don't have, it's not that you have a bad instinct of how to do something or you're doing something wrong. You just, have an instinct, a physical instinct of how to go about something. And I remember as a child, and I think this is the experience of lots of dyspraxic children, often physical things, it was just kind of decided that I wasn't very sporty.
Yes.
I wasn't very good at dancing and swimming hard and stuff like that. As a child, I did find these things difficult, but I assumed, because we assume these things, it would be something that I always found very difficult, and that's not ended up being the case at all.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah. And as I've kind of got older and I've learned more things, and music college, and I've worked my way through being able to do different things, and I started lifting weights, and I don't anymore, but I run and things like that. All of the skills I learned as an adult. I did not learn them as a child. I couldn't do them as a child.
Yes.
Because they were very poorly explained, because presumed knowledge, in swimming, or presume that you know how to do that, or And I remember I learned to swim when I was 26, and one of the first things about swimming that I learned how to do, I didn't know that you had to put your face in the water, And that's absurd, right? How do you not know that? But no one had explicitly said, now you must put your face in the water.
Yeah. And,
and
the other thing about dyspraxis is we can be quite literal. So the use of semantics is so important. It is why I have 3 singing teachers, because actually the way that each person explains it, they don't give me the whole picture. It's nothing to do with them. It's just how I process. So when I hear it a different way each time, I can then make a process that actually works for me. Do you know what I mean? So it's really interesting. What you're saying is so exciting. We just got Joseph is just saying yes, and Michael Carter Young was just saying was never diagnosed, but large motor movements were always difficult. Football and dancing, for example. Exactly, Michael. And Chichi is saying, wow, Jack, your explanation is incredibly profound and has given very real and clear articulation for other dyspraxic people to understand. Thank you, Chichi. Thank you, Jack. Stephanie is saying, this is so lovely to hear it explained properly. Would be great to let those of us who teach understand as children can't really explain themselves. Thanks, Stephanie. Carry on, Jack.
So that's one of the things. It's interesting to see football mentioned, because as someone that grew up where I did, in the kind of environment I did, or went to the kind of school I did, if you're not good at football, or at least some other vaguely interesting sport, it's quite embarrassing, really. That's the thing you want to be good at. You want to be able to be good at. And I always assumed it was just something I was never going to be good at. I'm not good at football now, but I've not really put the work in, to be honest. And I bet that if I approached it now and I actually broke down things, which is what I've learned how to do, I'd be able to learn to be perfectly as good as anyone else. And this is the thing that I gained from starting to refer to it as blank canvas syndrome. It wasn't bad instincts that I had to unlearn. And it wasn't that I'm just not naturally very good at it. It was that I started with absolutely no instincts. And the benefit of that I learned, and I now kind of see dyspraxia as a strength for this reason. The benefit of that is that I can learn from the ground up and get everything right first time. Start it well at basic level. Sure, it doesn't matter. And it gradually, patiently, and plug away at it. And as a dyspraxic, you know that you have to work very, very, very hard, because it's the rehearsal process that we depend upon, because otherwise people don't learn how to do things. From the ground, step by step by step by step. And actually what I found with singing, for example, is that something that I originally found more difficult than most of my peers, most of the people in my year group, most of the people at Guildhall, I found very unnatural feeling for me, very uninstinctive. What I ended up finding was that now, as a singer, and I'm nowhere near what I want to be, but none of us is, and it's a process, and I'm still learning, and I'm enjoying learning, and I've got a long way to go, and I accept that. However, when I stand up and sing, there is not one thing that I do not understand. And every movement that I have done laryngally, with my tongue, I understand. If I have a vocal problem, I know exactly what it is. It's not because I'm some kind of naturally gifted, amazing pedagogue at all. It's because I've had to learn it in such tiny incremental steps and ask so many questions in order to be able to do it. The advantage of that is that you don't forget that stuff. Maybe you do, but you theoretically you know it. And therefore, none of it's accidental. I'm not standing up there going, well, that went well for some reason. I know exactly why it went well. I think if you handle it well, it can translate into actually being more solid than perhaps neurotypical people might be in a physical skill that you've learned, because it's so deliberate, it's so methodical. And I think it's why, as you were saying before, we come across, you do, and I know that I do, because people tell me that. It's really intense. Intense. We just can't do anything. It's on or off. You can either do it 105% and learn it and drum it in and overdo it and immerse yourself in it, and then by the end of it you'll be secure, or you're not going to get off the ground. It just doesn't get anywhere, and people will be looking at you like, what was that?
Exactly.
In that position.
It's that I mean, the amount of times, Jack, when I sit in front of people and they go, Nadine, you're just so intense, and it's trying to make them see what the pictures I have to make in terms of even finding my vocal vocabularies, because for me, like what you were saying, I have to plan sometimes how I speak.
Yeah.
Because what I can do is I can see words in my head sometimes, but I can't, I can see it, but I can't take it down to say it.
Yeah, yeah.
So sometimes, like actually, Chichi's here, and we were in a talk, and Chichi, I was explaining about Chichi and what Chichi plays, and all I could see in my head was a cello, and all I could say was cello, and even though she's a double bassist,
Oh, I see. Yeah, yeah.
it was just like I could see it. They look the same, but I couldn't say that. It's really. It is quite intense, and even explaining things to someone. But I do want to bring our point, what Stephanie was making as well, about how to explain it to children and to themselves. What I've noticed is when I ask a question, because I've got the spiky thing that you were talking about, where some of me is really highly developed, but some of me isn't as highly developed. When I ask a question of somebody, they immediately think, oh, well, you just do this, and then you just do that, and then you just do that. And then I ask them to slow it down, and they do exactly the same thing. Yeah. And I'm like, no, I really need you to break it down so I can understand it. And then I realize that I have to move on.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that person is not going to be able to give me what I need, So the way that people become familiar with how to teach people or to help dyspraxics learn is really, really, really important.
Absolutely. And I think actually I've been lucky because the singing teacher that I have learned with since Guildhall has been really understanding about dyspraxia and has always gone out of his way to try and understand how to make things easier, because I think it was frustrating for both of us early on, because he'd explain a perfectly simple concept that everybody else understood, that any Tom, Dick or Harry would get from a basic explanation, and I would absolutely chuck it over the side and end up with something bizarre that I came back to. And he was like, never seen that before. And that would happen all the time. And I think as we've worked together for longer, he's got more and more used to the way that I might process things. Just oddities. Some things do come very quickly because they just happened verbally to chime very well, and some things don't. And I think you're someone that I've heard talk lots of times about the importance of the language that we use. And it's fundamental in the way we think, because we think verbally. We do. That's our means of understanding the world. We view it verbally. We teach children words because it's a way to express us. We're expressive beings. Yeah. And as far as dyspraxia goes, the verbal is so important. And it's one of the reasons why David Grant points out, lots of psychologists point this out, generally dyspraxic people have above average verbal intelligence skills. They're better actually at learning languages. They're better at learning their own language. They're better at understanding language and using it to express what they want to express, even though there are these little disconnects. Because of the fact that so much of their understanding of things has to be purely verbal, because things don't translate themselves necessarily as quickly into physical things. And so what I've learned as I've got older and more experience with dealing with my own experience of dyspraxia is that the words used are so important, and absolute clarity at all times. Don't assume anything.
Yes.
So much. And they don't want to admit that they've explained something abysmally poorly. Brilliant teachers bother to explain something, and people that they expect all the plaudits for being a brilliant teacher because they've made this person good and that. But actually, if you can't explain something fundamentally to someone with absolutely no instinct for it at that point, I think that is a failure, really.
Yeah.
However, I don't think people set out with malign intent.
No, not at all.
People.
Not at all.
And I think it's just one of those things.
Yeah.
We as a society perhaps need to take more seriously, because there are so many people with it. It's incredibly common. It's one of the most common learning differences people have. And being verbally clear in that way makes such a difference, particularly when you're a child. The number of embarrassing instances I could have avoided if things were explained better. And people say, well, everybody else understood. Yeah, all right, no, I didn't. So actually, not everyone understood. And if there'd been another dyspraxic person in the room, they might as well be in the same position. It's not just because everybody else gets something doesn't mean I have to as well. And it might well be a verbal failure. However, as you get better at that, you get better at asking the right questions.
Yes.
So explain something and you're like, oh, I see what's happened here. They found out a fundamental set that they assumed I knew, but I didn't know actually.
Exactly.
So, and then you have to say, I'm sorry, this might seem like an absurd question, but do you have to put your face in the water per chance? Yes, you do. Well, it turns out, and then that one step makes everything else make so much more sense in context. You're able to learn from the ground up, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah.
And because as I was saying before, any dyspraxic person has a work ethic for free.
Yes.
You have that, or you just can't do anything. It's not to do with unpleasant work, difficult tasks, any task, fun or difficult or unpleasant or perfectly pleasant, involves so much planning, so much thought. You have to be 5 steps ahead of yourself, and you seem very cautious and you seem very kind of over focused and over diligent. But actually, because it's how we learn things anyway, there is never a sticking point. Most neurotypical people get to a point where an easy task becomes suddenly difficult, and it involves a lot of work to get to the next level of that task. We don't have that because that point is on the base level.
Yes.
So from there, it's the same. So it's not so difficult. So that's brilliant. That's an advantage. And in many ways, dyspraxia is a superpower for that reason, and for the and the right instincts from the ground up, which I think is brilliant for anyone that's dyspraxic to be able to harness that is fantastic. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so funny because I had a personal training session with my Josie Benson personal training, and she wanted me to do a plank, right, on my thing, and then come up on my hands on a plank, and then go back down on a plank. And I started doing it because one of the things with dyspraxia that we haven't covered is that with dyspraxia, sometimes you don't have enough muscle development from when you're born. So for me, some of my stomach muscles didn't get fully developed. Some of my Moro reflex didn't get fully developed. So I had to go through a whole point where I had to start putting paintbrushes down my arm, so my body would understand the sensitivity of moving forward and stuff like that. Anyway,
that's brilliant. That is.
Yeah, I digress.
Absolutely fantastic. Yeah.
but I started doing it with my right arm, and Jack, I have to say, I couldn't come up. Like it was like no matter what I did, because there's something about the muscle development, I couldn't come up. Now I'm a great fan of Feldenkrais as well.
Yeah.
Well, I said, why don't I? Because I didn't say I can't do it. I was just like, why don't I try it with my left hand first, and it might teach my right hand how to do it, or my right muscles how to do it. I started with my left hand, and all of a sudden I had this pattern. And then I went with my right hand, and there was the pattern. So that it's like moving that neurological space over to the right side of the body, that left and right side of the body, to teach the other side how to do something. And like you say, if I hadn't been dyspraxic, I wouldn't be so investigative. I wouldn't be like this scientist of my own body, working out how to do things better. You know, I've got, oh my gosh, we've just got some comments. I just want to do these quickly. Bobby is just saying, one just realizes just how fantastic you both are. I never knew. Oh, thank you, Bobby. Michael Karcher is saying, yep, re-football. And Michael Karcher is saying, yep, intense. Teresa says, I have aphantasia and rely on verbal understanding too. Yes, Teresa.
Yeah.
Stephanie is saying, a good teacher will copy why the pupil doesn't get it. We'll check why the pupil doesn't get it the first time, and we'll drill down into the reasons why until the student can achieve. Lovely thought process, Stephanie. Thank you. And Grace Loveless, it says, Jack, you're a dude. Likewise, Nadine. Oh, thanks, Grace. Dudette. I love it. Dude and dudette. We can do that. Oh my gosh, Jack, it's just, you know, I want to celebrate you because, you know, you're going to go on, if you don't mind me saying, you're going to go on and do some PhD stuff around dyspraxia, which I highly celebrate, and will do anything I can to support that process with you. I just like whatever you need, you know, you've got it.
Thank you.
But what I'd really love to talk about is your 3 tips, because, you know, I always ask for that, of people who, you know, want to learn about dyspraxia more, or, you know, or people with dyspraxia, whatever you want to say. Do you just give us your 3 tips?
Well, I mean, if we have today, if we've sold dyspraxia to you and you want to apply to become dyspraxic, I don't think you can do that, unfortunately. So, but other tips that I've got, I'll take applications, but other tips that I've got is I think that the first main tip I have in dealing with dyspraxia, and as I said, a lot of this tip came from my own experience. More of it then came from research of studies that have been done, partly around when I was writing my PhD proposal, working out what I wanted to study, looking at how they'd worked with dyspraxic actors, or dyspractors as I termed them, in drama schools. And there's been some amazing research that's been done, fantastic stuff about expression and all of that. Was viewing it as a learning difference, not necessarily a learning difficulty, but something that you can turn into an advantage. You've got that verbal intelligence for free. You've got that work ethic for free. You've got blank canvas syndrome for free. And you can learn the right instincts the first time. You never have to completely unlearn something that you've botched. I mean, well, I'm not going to say never. Sometimes that will happen. But generally speaking, you can be as good as you want to be. And there are well-documented cases now of dyspraxic actors, singers, dancers, gymnasts, things you'd assume you could not possibly do if you had any kind of coordinational deficit. And actually people do perfectly well, not just perfectly well, at a world-class level. I'm sure you, as I do, know other dyspraxic opera singers who are fantastic.
Absolutely.
And their shortcomings and their difficulties, as we all do. But that's not just dyspraxic people, that's anyone. Yes. So my first main tip is start viewing it as an opportunity, because it is an opportunity. You can use it, you can harness it, and you can use it to your advantage if you're that kind of positive thinker regarding your own, the way that we're all made up.
I think that's brilliant, because, you know, for myself, you know, I recognize that, you know, I haven't been as vocal about being dyspraxic, because I have felt that I've had other things that I have to also walk into the world with, being a woman, being black, you know, I'm already walking into the world with, you know, lots of stuff. So for me, I've been less vocal about it. But you know what? After today, I am going to get my vocal head on around this stuff, because actually it is brilliant. And I am intense, but I'm intense because I want to be great at what I do. And, you know, one of the things that you talk about, the benefits, we can be masters of anything just because of the process. But yeah, go on. Second tip.
My second tip is, just because you have something, it doesn't mean that you have to have all of the facets of it. So we were talking about this before as well. When lots of people say, oh, you're dyspraxic, must be really clumsy. Well, no, actually, I'm not clumsy. I'm actually probably less clumsy than most people in my experience. I'm really not a clumsy person. It's not a word I'd use to describe myself at all. And this is one of the things that is a risk with labeling learning differences. If someone says, you have dyspraxia, and something says, right, I'm going to go out, I'm going to become the most dyspraxic man in the world. I'm going to become an emblem of dyspraxia. I'm going to spill trays of drinks everywhere. I'm completely inept. I'm going to put I don't know, kettles in fridges. I'm going to chuck stuff in the shower. Why is that in there? I'm going to do all of the things that any dyspraxic person has ever done. And it's very tempting when we get something like that to go, oh, I need to be a proper dyspraxic. No, you don't. Just deal with the problems you have. And I have ADHD as well, as lots of dyspraxics do. Lots of dyspraxics have an attention disorder as well. And it plays into it. And my idiosyncrasies, I was going to say problems, but I don't think I view it as that anymore.
No, they're not. They're benefits.
Yeah. My differences are my differences. I'm very different from anyone else, actually. And that's fine. I don't need to deal with anyone else's problems. Other people might have different problems. I don't need their problems as well. I need mine, for heaven's sake. They've got their own. So I'll deal with mine. And I've learned methods of dealing with my problems, my verbal problems, my problems with handwriting, my problems that I personally have. And I'm sure they deal with theirs. I don't need to deal with theirs as well. So just deal with the problems that you have, deal with them well, and you don't need to deal with anybody else's. That's all right. It's okay if you're not 100% dyspraxic. You haven't failed. Do you know what I mean? So that's my second big tip.
I do break my toes a lot, Jack.
Yeah, there are pitfalls to it, aren't there? I've done all sorts of absurd things. I remember last summer, or it might have been a couple of summers ago now, I left the house and I felt something in my pocket and I didn't know what I'd put in my pocket. And I'd got the lid of a deodorant bottle. This is pretty standard for me. And I had put in that a 20p piece and stored it upright in my pocket. And when I thought about it afterwards, I remember doing that when I left the house. I thought, I got there to put my deodorant on, I got the deodorant cap. I thought, I must put that 20p in. Right, so that's in there. Good. That's done. Out. Brilliant. Out the door. Did that ever need to be? What was that supposed to be? Look, all sorts of problems. When I was growing up, I used to get in the car. And my mum would be like, "Why have you got a fork?" I don't know. It's just one of those things, right? Yeah, weirdnesses. You're like, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I get in the car like backwards. Everybody's like, "Why do you get in the car back?" I said, "I don't know. It's just easier."
Yeah, and it's probably not, but it doesn't matter. Yeah, stuff like that all the time. I make myself laugh doing absurd things.
So what's your third tip, darling?
My third tip, I was toying with what to put as a third tip, and I think that I like this one actually. I think it's important that we look at common ground is a really important thing across all of life, particularly at the moment. I've been thinking a lot about common ground. Some of the people that have most inspired me that aren't singers, people like Jesse Jackson, Fred Hampton, Martin Luther King, Paul Robeson, all kinds of political philosophers and thinkers and civil rights activists of their time that have been, for very obvious reasons, on my mind at the moment, were obsessed with what we have in common. Joe Cox, more recently, all kinds of brilliant people who think in the same way, which is that we can go on about how we're different and how certain among us will never understand this or that or the other, and class consciousness is lacking, for example, and there are huge problems with that. But for just one example, being working class unites millions and most people in the world.
Yes.
Regardless of whether they're black, white, whether they're an Asian minority ethnicity, whether they are dyspraxic, autistic, whether they've got cerebral palsy, they might all be united by one factor. And that's just one example of a factor. And that is a much, much bigger thing than the little things that make us slightly different. And sometimes you can be absolutely convinced that you are fundamentally different from every other human being and that your problems are so exclusive to you that no one else will ever understand them. And they are exclusive to you, but it doesn't matter because there's so many other ways in which we are the same. We are united by common factors. And certainly with education, it is this way because it's always been this way. But it doesn't mean that it will always be this way. And progress has been made in all kinds of ways. But just thinking about learning differences, just because things are not designed in such a way that dyspraxic people can do well from them, it doesn't mean that they won't change. And certainly the reason why I wanted to do a PhD about this called Dyspraxia and the Singing Actor was because of the fact that I think that things could very easily work for dyspraxic people just as well as they work for other people. It would just involve some minor changes. Do I think that all of the people that currently make education very difficult for dyspraxics are doing it on purpose? Of course I don't think that. You know, in the same way as I don't think that people that don't exhibit brilliant class consciousness and think about the problems of working class people or think about the problems of black people or women, do I think that they are necessarily, in all cases, out there thinking, "Oh, I'm going to make this really, really difficult for you"? No, of course not. I don't think it's a deliberate prejudice at all. But I do think that it's something that if we address, we could overcome and we could make education work for everybody. And add to which, because dyspraxics have that work ethic for free, I think we're better placed than maybe some other people to make those differences ourselves.
I love that. Looking for the similarities rather than the differences. I say that all the time. Look for the similarities rather than the differences. I love that, Jack. Jack, you're amazing. I just love you, mate. From the first day that I met you, I just, you know, you and I, yeah.
Absolutely.
But next tomorrow, I am going to have the choreographer and dancer Isabel Bakura White on, and she is going to come on and talk to us about all things dance. I don't know what her subject matter is going to be yet, so we'll just have to wait and see. We've got Michael Karcher Young saying this interview is a joy. Stephanie Murphy saying, if you're not 100% dyspraxic, you haven't failed. She said, love it. Rebecca Louise Dow is saying, amen. Joseph Hookway is saying, this is so brilliant. I feel so reassured and inspired. Thank you both. It's like hearing from the kindred spirit. Huge fan. Whoa, Joseph. And Lena Christmas is saying, what a great guy. Yes, what a great guy.
Oh.
I'm so glad I'm celebrating you today because, yeah, absolutely. Susan, my daughter is both dyspraxic and dyslexic. Worked very hard to achieve a first in her degree. Well done. Doing well in her life. Yeah. Love your tips. Thank you both so much. And Gabrielle said, brilliant speaker on his subject. He absolutely is. And I want to say, I think you've got an amazing, amazing career ahead of you, Jack. One of the things that I loved working with you was your work ethic. It was really great for a change to be in front of somebody who worked just as great and just as had that attention to detail and that focus that I did, and it meant I didn't have to feel like I had to apologise for it, of which I'd never apologised for it again after that, because it was
I'm really pleased that you never have. It's such an asset to you, and it was lovely to come into a room with someone that I really respected and admired, and I was like, oh my days, they do it the same. They are like me, and I loved that. And I was so reassured and so energized by it that it made me really want to give 110% because I could see that someone else was doing exactly the same.
Oh, thank you, Jack. You've just moved me. Thank you, sweetheart. So Chichi is saying, in a nutshell. Danny is saying, hello, 901. And Danny is saying, excellent interview. And Toretto is saying, communality, but without failing into normative. Very true. And Teresa saying this is joyful. So what are your final thoughts? Because everybody wants Jack's final thoughts.
My final thoughts.
Yeah, I tell you, go ahead.
I think, and this goes for everybody, not just people with dyspraxia, though it's a brilliant example of a thing. There are so many ways in which so many of us have resources available to us that we've either seen as failures or as shortcomings, as difficulties in some way, and they don't need to be. I think there is absolutely an encouragement, from me at least, to be forensic about yourself, because that is your own responsibility. You have to be the one to look at yourself inwards and intently, not in a sort of self-glorifying way as such necessarily, just in an explorative way, just to explore yourself objectively, learn who you are and accept who you are and build who you are. And I think as much as that goes for dyspraxics, it goes for absolutely everybody at the moment, particularly people that realize that they have things that are unhelpful to themselves, to other people. These are things you can and must tackle for everybody, for the world. And blimey, if everybody did that, we'd be sorted, wouldn't we? You know?
Absolutely, mate. I love it being the, you call it that, I call it being the scientist of your mind, like, empowering your state of mind, empowering what you do. I just think you are incredible. I love you. I love you. I love you. I mean, and just thank you for coming on here and just being so brilliant. I know that this interview today, this chat is gonna help so many and serve so many people. Jack, I'm speechless. I've got nothing else to say. You've said it all. And I thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for being here with us. We have loved having you all contribute to our conversation today. Thank you so much. And Jack, just thank you for so much clarity, so much brilliance, and just so much detail. It has been wonderful to have you here this morning. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me.
Not at all. Big hugs, everybody. Take care.